I actually found something that cut down my editing time by 2/3. No hype, no nonsense, it really did. I edit all my own videos and I edit a podcast, which is at least one episode a week, and I've been doing that for well over a year, and I hate it. So I actually had some of those podcast episodes stacking up. Meanwhile, I get a comment from a fella named Doug that says, hey, if you add this thing to your workflow, it'll cut down your editing time significantly. He was very confident, and I was intrigued. My editing workflow for the podcast is to bring the raw audio file into Descript and start with the transcription-based editing. It's just a lot quicker to go through the words on the screen in the transcription-based editing and cut out the parts you don't want, cut out the silences, and all that jazz. The problem is, in every transcript-based editor I've seen, whether it's Descript or Camtasia's Audiate or CapCut's transcription-based editor or DaVinci, they can cut the silences out for you and the words that you don't want, but the accuracy leaves a lot to be desired. So what you end up doing is going through and making that first pass of cuts and maybe edits, getting rid of all the silences, and then you have to come back through and listen to the whole thing all over again and make adjustments. Because the way it works in transcript-based editing is it takes your audio file or the audio track of your video file, and it uses AI to transcribe that into words. And then it tries to figure out where those words are in relation to the video, and it's not always accurate. In fact, a lot of times it's way off. So when I tell Descript to cut out all the silences that are longer than half a second, it ends up cutting off the tail end of some words, it ends up cutting off the beginning of some other words, and then there's spoken words in the waveform that you can see, they're there plain as day, but the AI didn't recognize them, didn't know what the words were, so it just cut them out altogether thinking it was nothing. So you have to play it back through, listen carefully, and when you find all these places where a word's cut off or gee, I think a whole phrase is missing there, you have to go down to your timeline, make the clip on the left a little bit longer, or make the clip on the right a little bit shorter, and then keep going on and do that over and over and over again. I've always wondered as I'm doing that, and I'm looking at the timeline, I'm looking at the waveform and going, it is painfully obvious that there's something being said here, that there is audio. This is not a silence. Why in the world these AI editors can't figure that out and get it right? Well, that's where Timebolt comes into play. And if you've heard about Timebolt before and passed on it because you thought, it's going to cut out the silences, that's only one step, but it's adding another step because I have to run it through Timebolt to do that, so nah, I'll keep doing it my way. You're not alone. I have seen people talk about Timebolt and other things like it before and thought the same thing. So let me tell you how this ends up saving you time. If you're editing your audio or videos by manually going through first and cutting out silences, or cutting out silences as any part of your editing process, every one of those gaps that you want to cut out, you're clicking the start of the silence and cutting it, you're clicking the end of the silence and cutting it, and then you're removing that silence from the timeline. So that's at the very least 3 or 4 clicks every time you want to remove a silence. It may only be a few seconds, but the time adds up and it takes a while. If you're using transcript-based editing, like I have been, you can quickly get rid of the silences in theory, but then because you have to go back and fix so many of the inaccurate cuts, that ends up taking a lot of time. Now, the second way it saves you time is when you're doing the rest of your editing. If you're doing it the old-fashioned way with the timeline editor and you're playing through and cutting things as you come to them and making adjustments, well, you're not going to have all those silences that you have to keep playing through over and over again as you edit or cut them out as you come to them. And if you're using a transcript-based editor, the transcripts that the AI creates tends to be more accurate if you have accurately removed all the silences. So those are areas in your video or your audio that it doesn't have to figure out full width or get confused and think that they are part of words or that the words next to them aren't words or whatever the AI thinks. And this time savings is a point that Doug made when he made that comment on my Descript video. And I should tell you that Doug is the co-founder of Timebolt, so he knows a thing or two about it. And he was very confident and made some bold claims about the time savings. In fact, he provided me with a 1-year subscription and said, try this out for yourself, and if it doesn't work for you, you can make fun of me, call me names, and point at me. But he was obviously very confident that if I just tried it, it would work and I would want to tell people about it. And he was right. Now, Timebolt did not pay me to make this video. I did mark it as a paid promotion because I did receive access to it for free. but neither Doug nor Timebolt have any control over what I'm saying in this video. I figured since I got free access though, I could be biased, and I want to make sure I'm upfront with you about that. Now here's the other time-saving aspect of using Timebolt to accurately cut out the silences before you do anything else with your video editing. And that is that you're creating a much smaller video file for your video editing software to work with. I don't know about you, but I've edited videos where the raw video that I start with is 3 minutes, and I've had some where it's 2.5 hours. If you're dealing with a big file, things are going to be slower. So if you have an hour-long raw file, if you could start off with cutting out all those silences and take it from an hour-long video to a 30-minute video, it's half the size. So your video editing software doesn't have to worry about that other half. Now, if you're thinking, well, Bob, I cut out all those silences first thing when I start editing, so it's already down to a 30-minute file. Oh, no, it's not down to a 30-minute file, because in your non-destructive editor, you're making those marks and those cuts in the editor, and you're telling it in my final output, I don't want these parts to be here. So if you've cut out sections, they're not really cut out though, because they have to be there so that if you come back while you're editing and decide, no, I want this clip to be a little longer in the beginning, I want to include that part, I want that other section in, so I'm just going to drag this out to the right and extend this clip and make it longer. The video editing software has to keep that data so that it can be ready for those edits anytime you want to make them. So it's working with the original raw file that you imported into it. And if you're using AI features in videos that you bring into your video editor, say you're using CapCut's background remover or image enhance or enhance voice, the longer the clip is that you want to apply those to, the longer it takes to run. And if you have an hour-long video in CapCut with your clips broken up and you're applying all these AI features, things can get really slow and really wonky. The same thing is true of Descript and every other editor that I've worked with. When you start adding those AI effects and things into it, it starts slowing things down, and the longer the starting video is that it's working with, the more it's going to slow things down and bring them to a screeching halt. And in some cases, it seems like it just throws it into a death loop where it can't even do anything anymore. So I too thought cutting out the silences can't be that big of a deal, but sure enough, they are. And the proof is in the pudding, because the very first time I used it, I had these 3 podcast episodes to edit, and I'd been putting it off because I just dread it, and I decided to give Timebolt a try that day, and the first one went so much quicker that I went ahead and did the second one and the third one, and by the time I was done, I realized that I had edited all 3 of those episodes in the same amount of time that it usually takes me to edit one. Now, Timebolt's main feature is cutting out silences and doing it accurately. Timebolt does a whole lot of other stuff. In fact, depending on what you're producing, you could edit your entire project using Timebolt. But for this video, I just want to focus on saving time by accurately cutting out the silence. And Timebolt does not use AI to cut out those silences. It actually looks at the waveform and says, there's something there, I shouldn't cut that out, unlike the AI that does not do that. So old-fashioned coding for the win. Now I happen to have a video in need of editing, so come along with me as we take it into Timebolt. I'm in the Timebolt application for desktop PC, and the first thing we need to do is come over here in the upper right-hand corner and flip this switch so that we're in dark mode, because as you know, only a psychopath uses light mode when dark mode is available. The first thing we need to do is bring in our video or audio file that we want to work with. I've selected the file, it's going through and doing its prepping and processing thing, and now it pops up with a preview of the video and the timeline with the waveform just below it. And you can tell by the colors that it has already figured out what's a silence and what's not a silence. Again, this is not transcribing, it's not using AI, it's looking at the amplitude of the waveform and figuring out what is audio and what is silent. If you have multiple audio tracks in your project, whether it's an audio or a video, you have this drop down where you can select the appropriate track. I only have 1 track in here, so there's nothing to do with that. If you're going to be playing through this, you can drop down and pick the playback speed, which is very handy. When I'm editing, I'm usually going at least 1.5x speed to get things done faster. And the last thing over here you have is the preview chunk. What this will do is if your video or audio file is longer than 45 minutes, it'll split it up into chunks. Now, don't worry, this doesn't have any effect on the file that you output. It keeps it all together when you export it, but it's just showing you the previews here in 45-minute segments. this. Down here we have our timeline, and you might see it's been broken up to red and green sections. Those are the two main colors, although you can have an orange section, and I'll show you that in just a minute. The way that Timebolt has identified what is a red section versus what is a green section is based on the settings down here. It's looking for anything that's quieter than negative 47 decibels. It's removing silences that are longer than half a second. You can change that setting if you want. It's leaving a left padding of 0.01 seconds and a right padding of 0.15. Those you should not have to change. They do pretty well at leaving just the right amount before and after. The ignore detection shorter than helps get rid of things that are actually sounds. They're not silences, but they're not the sounds that you want to keep in your audio or video. Maybe you bump your mic and it has that real quick bump sound, but that's all that's there. Well, you don't want to keep that in your video, so 0.75 seconds is a pretty good place to have that set. If you look at your project and you find that it's marking for deletion sound that isn't silence, or that it's leaving in silence that isn't sound, that's where you would adjust this threshold so that you get it right in the sweet spot. Now, in my experience so far, I haven't had to fiddle with any of these settings at all. When it comes in and it detects where it needs to put its sound level, that's worked out just fine for me. The same with all these other settings. Now, if you change any of these settings, you do need to hit this Update Silence Detection button so that it can run it through that process based on the new settings and mark things appropriately. By default, when you play through this, it's going to skip over these red sections, the sections that are marked for delete. And I'll just press the space bar to start playing. So let me show it to you. This is the glyph.ai home. Notice how it just skipped that whole red section. I didn't have to sit through the whole thing being silent. There's something else fun you can do with your timeline, and that is flip the timeline. What that'll do is it'll just play the silences. So instead of playing the audio that you intend to keep, it'll just play what it's going to cut out. So notice now everything with audio is red and everything without audio is green. You can use that if you like to make sure there's no audio in what's about to be deleted. Click wherever you want to start on your timeline, press the space bar. All right, let's flip our timeline back so that the green is the audio we're keeping and the red is the stuff that we want to delete. If we find a section that for whatever reason is marked for deletion and we don't want it deleted, all we have to do is when our playhead here is in that section, hit O on the keyboard and it will switch it from red to green. You can also use your mouse, come up to this little bar above the area that was cut or uncut and switch it by just clicking that bar. We're going to leave that cut out because we don't need it. So O is turning the marked section on or off. So if you have your playhead anywhere in this green section and you click O on your keyboard, it marks that whole thing as a red section now. As we scroll through the timeline looking at what it did, I find this little blip over here and I want to know what that is. So I'm going to click here because it's marked for deletion. Maybe that's an important word. I better check. Nope, that was just a little clearing of the throat. And because I have this ignore detection shorter than 0.75 seconds, it got ousted as a silent, which is perfect. I don't need that in there. There are many other things that you can do in Timebolt. You can do a really quick punch in where you can zoom in to a part of the video. I already did this in my video showing this upper left-hand side. That was already in it before I brought it into Timebolt, but I could do that in Timebolt using its punch in feature to any section on the video or the screen that I wanted to. You can use Timebolt to stitch together multiple videos or multiple audio files that you have. Maybe you recorded the video in 2 sections. Timebolt can put it all together into one video for you. That's really handy for organization and editing and keeping track of things. You can also fast forward through silences. Maybe you want to be talking to a camera and then you're going to step back and you're going to do 3 cartwheels and then you're going to run a mile away from the camera and back. Well, you can set this fast forward deal so that you'll be talking to the camera, everything's normal, and then when things go silent for whatever time you set, it'll start running that in 3x speed.
You still see the action, just 3 times faster, which is great for demonstrations and live gameplay.
Once you turn that fast forward option on, now you have a new option up here on your timeline. We'll click right here on the clip in this red section that's been marked for deletion. We can use our mouse and click the bar and it goes from red to orange, which is saying that's a fast forward thing. Our next click takes it to green, which is normal, leave it alone. And then our third click takes it to the red or marked for deletion. You can do the same thing without using your mouse. Click anywhere in this clip, use the O key on your keyboard. If it's currently red, O will take it to orange, which means it's going to fast forward through that. It's just taking that little section, that clip, and making it go 3 times the normal rate. you still have the option to mark this as leave it alone or mark this for deletion by just cycling through the O key on your keyboard or clicking this bar above it. I've turned it to fast forward. It's orange. I can click again and say no, leave it alone. That's green. I can click O again and mark it for red. And now once you mark something for deletion here, it sort of auto advances to the end of that clip. We've got this section, it's green, and you're up here at the beginning of it, and you click your O key to say, I want to get rid of this, so mark this for deletion. It already knows we don't need to do anything else in this section, so let's just move on to the next place where we actually do need to do something. If you're playing through your timeline and making other edits in here, besides just deleting the silences, maybe you come to a point where your playhead is right here and you decide, this whole thing, I just want to cut that, that was a bad take. That's easy. You can just hit S on your keyboard and it'll make a split. See our new split mark up here, and now we have this as a clip. Make sure our playhead is inside that area and hit the O key on our keyboard. It marked that for deletion and advanced us on. I'm going to start playing through it so that I can show you how this works while you're playing through, so that you don't even have to use your mouse. You can just keyboard your whole way through this. So we hit the space bar to play.
Combine an AI
This starts, I'm hearing it, I should be hearing it, and I go, oh, that was a bad take.
Sort of hard to
I hit the
explain,
O
so let me
button,
show it to you.
it's gone.
This is the glyph
Play
that
through
AI
that one, it's
homepage.
good. I
See
listened
from
to
the
this
upper right-hand
one.
corner is in output,
Wait a
which means
minute,
it's
I don't know
fairly
what
new
that
version
sounded
of
like.
the
Let me
sort
hit
of
the
hard to
U and
explain,
that'll
so
take
let me
me
show you.
back.
This is the glyph that
All right,
AI
yeah, no, that
homepage. See
sounds
from the
good.
upper
That's what I
right-hand
want
corner
to
is
keep.
in alpha,
Okay,
which
I'm
means
playing
it's still
along.
fairly
This
new
is
first
good.
version
This is
versus
good.
whatnot. So there's
Yeah,
still
I
a lot
like
to be
that. I
determined
like
about
that.
how it's going to work out. So there's still
What is this? Oh
up in the
no,
upper
hit the
left-hand,
O. I
up
don't
on the
want
logo,
that.
up on the logo, it's
Wait, let me hit the space bar, pause this thing, because I didn't hear what this was and I want to hear what it was. So using these keyboard shortcuts and some of the tools that Timebolt has built into this thing, like having this preview playback rate be able to set that much faster than the 1x. It seems clear to me that Timebolt was built by people that edit video and are impatient like me, that are like, why can't there be a better way? Why can't this just be simple? And they've incorporated all those things that we've all thought in there. So what do you do when you've made all these cuts? Let's say you want to take it into another editor. You don't want to do the punch in, punch out, any of that stuff in here. You don't want to record in Timebolt and use the screen recorder, any of these other features that it has. You just want to cut out the silences because, hey, Bob said that saved him 2/3 of the time. Now you want to get this out of here. What do you do? Well, that depends on what editor you plan on taking this into. But they've got you covered in multiple different ways. Now, suppose you want to edit in CapCut. You can come down here where you have this export video button, click these little 3 dots here and say export clips to folder. What that'll do is it'll export all the things that were marked green and orange. It'll export them to a folder. So you have all those individual clips. Another way you can export that keeps your original video file completely intact is you can export one of these advanced options. So if you're using Final Cut, you can export a Final Cut XML file or a Final Cut multicam XML file. If you're using DaVinci or Premiere Pro, you can export an XML file. And what this is going to contain is like the instructions for that editor, Premiere, DaVinci, whatever. So when you bring this into DaVinci or you bring it into Premiere, it's going to tell it, make all these cuts and get rid of this stuff. But it's not going to cut those elements out of your original file. And it's also much quicker because this XML file that's being exported is basically just a cut list. Something else I got to tell you is I was watching one of the Timebolt live office hours. They do them every week on Thursday mornings as far as I can tell, and users are invited to join in on that. I can't remember if they use Zoom or Google Meet or whatever it is, but they have users on there every week that are talking through their workflows and they're finding ways to do things quicker, asking questions, and the co-founders of Timebolt are right there answering, directing, giving suggestions. And I saw one where there was a gentleman using Camtasia, and the Timebolt folks said, we don't really get much request for that. Here's some ways you can work with it still, even though we don't have a dedicated export for that. But sure enough, there is now a Camtasia advanced export option. So that tells me they're paying attention to what their customers are asking for, even if it's not a whole bunch of people beating down their door to make the change. Now, if you want to do what is possibly the most simple export here, just exporting all the green sections as one video file, well, that's the big button that I've saved for last, which is export video. Click that big blue button and it gets to work. You also have this little option underneath, activate turbo mode. And when you click that rascal, you got two ways you can apply turbo mode. You can either use a constant speed modifier like 1.125. So that's going to take your entire video and it's going to speed it up just a little bit. It shouldn't be so much that you sound like a chipmunk, but it's going to make things move along a little faster than you recorded it naturally. You can also specify the number of seconds that you need this video to be. Say you put together a short that's 60 seconds long. Well, you need it to be 60 seconds long, but it turns out that it's 1 minute and 3 seconds. You can say, nope, make this exactly 60 seconds, and that's what it'll do. It'll speed it up just enough to make it fit within that 60-second time frame. The last thing I want to show you are some settings you can adjust within Timebolt. That's on the top left corner here. We click that settings button. I normally have these top two options on. I turned them off for this video today because it will make it sound a little different when you're playing through the audio when you're editing here, but what it outputs is not changed. None of these things are applied on the output. You have plenty of other options here, including the automatically detect the filter value. So that's how we ended up when I showed you how it was at -47 was where it started out. It automatically detected that. I didn't have to find that threshold. Now I can adjust it and make changes to it, but I don't want to have to do that every time. I want it to take a shot at it, and so far I've never had to adjust it. So that's one that I definitely leave checked. And I also leave this one that says move to the next cut after pressing the O key. That's the thing where you press the O key to either mark something for deletion or mark to keep it in or whatever. It figures, hey, you've already decided what you want to do with that clip. Let's move on and work on the next one. You've got a lot more settings here that you can fiddle with. I'm not going to get into all these. The video I've made today has already been long enough. I just wanted to introduce it to you, and I really wanted to convey for the folks that are in the same position I was a while back, thinking cutting out silences won't make that big of a deal in my editing time. Oh, it sure does. It absolutely does. And to let you know that Timebolt does have more features than that, although that's enough. I mean, saving me 2/3 of the time editing those podcast episodes, that had me hooked. So if you want to check it out, there's a link in the description. I'm probably an affiliate for Timebolt. I can't remember for sure, but just assume I am. So that means if you end up making a purchase, they do have a free trial, but if you end up making a purchase, either of a subscription or their lifetime plan, just assume that I will receive a small commission at no additional cost to you, and I sincerely appreciate that. I don't take it for granted when you take the time to use my link to go buy something that helps support me and my family. I genuinely appreciate it. I hope you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.